Thank you, Jamin. Thanks to Radish, and thanks especially to all of you for making the trip today. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to a scintillating conversation. I want to talk about how one lives with a terminal disease, because that's what we've been given, not only as individuals, but as a species. As individuals, of course, we all know that birth is a sexually transmitted disease that is proven lethal in every case. So you all know you're going to die. That's not a surprise. I'm going to suggest that it's going to happen faster than expected. In light of that terminal diagnosis, and when people are given a terminal diagnosis, say their medical doctor tells somebody they have 6 weeks or maybe 8 weeks to live, I don't know of anybody who responds to that by becoming inactive. Every case I hear about indicates that those people want to complete their relationships with people that they have in their lives. They actually want to do something with the time they have left. And especially if they have months or years to live, people then take it upon themselves to become particularly active in whatever it is they do. As Edward Abbey pointed out many, many years ago, sentiment without action is the ruin of the soul, or in another place, action is the antidote to despair. So hopefully I'm going to focus the conversation here on what actually matters. And I'll start by backing up a little bit and point out that climate change, anthropogenic climate change leading to abrupt climate change, are really just outcomes of this set of living arrangements, which I've stolen from the famous educator's book, Lies My Teacher Told Me, in categorizing into various topics, such as human superiority. And we're never told these things. Of course, nobody says these things in their out loud voice because they would get laughed at. Instead, all of these remain assumptions, unquestioned assumptions within this culture. So of course we're superior to all other animals. Of course we know that from the moment we're born, because when we hear conversations about non-human species, they're called lesser animals or lower animals. Nobody comes right out and says humans are superior, look our big brains, that's why we do all these things. Well, I mean, a few people actually say that, but for the most part they don't. Nobody mentions that we can't have infinite growth on a finite planet, it's just assumed that we can. The entire underpinnings of economics, the dismal science, rely upon infinite growth on a finite planet. That's where the positive discount rate or interest rate comes from. More is better, of course it is. Everything will always be better for future generations than it was for past generations. And when we say better, we mean more. More of what? More of everything, just more. That's all we need, that's all we want, is just more. We monetize everything as a result. We monetize the food, the water, the air. I was touring in New Zealand late last year, and New Zealand air was going for 85 cents a breath in Beijing, China. 85 cents a breath, US. I can't do the translation into New Zealand dollars. We are constantly told that, and people actually say this in their out loud voices, that hope is good, that hope in fact is unimpeachably good. Without hope, why bother? Why bother living? Well, hope, if you look at the actual definition, is just wishful thinking. Hope is expecting an outcome over which we have no agency, and of course a positive outcome. Hope and fear are the four-letter words that represent the twin sides of the I don't know the future coin. So I'm going to hope that it works out great, or I'm going to fear that it turns out badly, but I'm not going to actually do anything to ensure either outcome or to avoid an outcome. So hope, from my perspective, doesn't make a lot of sense. I prefer action over wishing that somebody else or something else takes action on my behalf. Endemic racism is built into every civilization so far, as is endemic misogyny, as well as endemic monetary disparity leading to poverty. And in the United States, on the leading edge of civilized action, of industrial civilization, what do you know? We have a president who's a racist, misogynist, wealthy man, and people are surprised. I was on campus today walking around, and the students were protesting that Ann Coulter had been invited to speak, apparently tonight, on campus, and yet you're all here, oddly enough. What is the matter with you people? They were protesting this one was going to speak and was going to be representing the views espoused by President Trump, who was elected with the help of those people on campus. And so I don't get the whole thing, but maybe that's just me. For the science part of this show, we could do the whole thing in 3 slides, but I won't. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in their vaunted 5th assessment, which was officially released in 2014 but heavily leaked beginning in September 2013, the IPCC concluded that global warming is irreversible without massive geoengineering of the atmosphere's chemistry. So we have to do something. As if doing something isn't what got us right here. Doing a whole bunch of things. We've been geoengineering for a long time, we just haven't called it that. Truth Out points out a few months later by a headline that the Intergovernmental Climate Report leaves hopes hanging on fantasy technology. And finally, the scientists come together and synthesize the referee journal literature, first with the National Academy of Sciences of the United States in February of 2015, proclaiming that geoengineering is no solution at all. And a European group of similar stature joins the fray just a few months later, concluding that geoengineering is not a viable solution. In fact, we've known for a really, really long time that civilization itself is an omnicidal heat engine. If you want to drive to extinction 200 species a day, what do? If you want to foul the air and dirty the water and wash the soil into the ocean, what do? If you want to create a set of living arrangements characterized by endemic misogyny, endemic racism, and endemic monetary policy, what do? Civilization. Civilization, that's the answer for you. It has been for several thousand years. It's only with civilization that we get all these horrors that have arisen. Before civilizations arose a few thousand years ago, there was something resembling humans, Homo erectus, for the last 2.8 million years, living what we might consider a primitive existence, but not going into human population overshoot at the level of the globe, not even once, for 2.6 million years. Homo sapiens comes along, 200,000 years we've been here on the planet, our species. And only within the last few thousand years have we managed to grow grains at scale, the basis for every civilization so far. And therefore, because of the ability to grow grains at scale, we can control the food supply, hence control the people. Sociopathy carries the day. But I digress. When I realized more than 12 years ago that civilization was an omnicidal heat engine, I decided to opt out. I was a distinguished professor at the University of Arizona. I suspect I'm the only professor who was ever recognized by the 2 transdisciplinary colleges at the University of Arizona, the Honors College and the Graduate College, with their highest awards. And I'm one of, there's so few statistics kept on this particular event that, in fact, I don't know a single statistic that's kept. We don't know how many people make full professor before the age of 40. It just never happens, basically. And so I was in quite a prestigious position, and I walked away from civilization because I recognized it as an omnicidal heat engine, and because I was in a position of enormous privilege, I just assumed that everybody would follow my lead. It sounds ludicrous when I say it out loud like that. It's almost like saying we can have infinite growth on a finite planet. People laugh out loud. So I walked away from civilization. I built I developed this property I call the Mud Hut in southwestern New Mexico, 2.7 acres, and I started growing food and building greenhouses and processing the food and making biochar to suck carbon out of the atmosphere and put it instead into soil and improve the situation, and bottle feeding goats. This is not pale ale, by the way. It's just a bottle that's holding the milk. And doing all these things and assuming that people would follow along, because once it was recognized by a distinguished professor like myself that civilization is an omnicidal heat engine, then of course everybody's going to opt out and start growing their own food. Why would they not? I remember being So naive when I was young, like 10 or 12 years ago. I suspect I'm still there for the most part. Well, when I was undertaking that project, which began in about 2004, and I moved there full-time in early 2009, we didn't know much about abrupt climate change. We didn't have the information about global dimming that we have today. In fact, I believe the first refereed journal article on the topic of global dimming came out, authored by James Hansen and colleagues, in late 2011. So we didn't know about the aerosol masking effect. So the ability to tally up all these contributors to climate change hadn't been put together yet. We didn't have the basic information. It was just about a year ago that Sam Carana, who is an anonymous person writing, probably is anonymous because he didn't want to go through the same set of things that I went through. And so he's 2 or 3 people writing from Europe and the East Coast of the United States or Canada, and perhaps the West Coast of the United States or Canada. And he did this excellent job in the middle of last year, the 15th of July, 2016, when he ponders a global average temperature rise of more than 10 degrees Celsius, that's above the 1750 baseline, by 2026. So within 10 years, he says, you add up all these things and we're gonna end up with a temperature that's higher than it's been in the last 2 billion years of planetary history. You see that the global average temperature of Earth has tended to be at ice age about 12 degrees Celsius, global average temperature, or hothouse, 22 degrees Celsius global average temperature. One time, 252.2 million years ago, during what's called the Great Dying, the temperature shot up to 23 degrees Celsius. That's the highest global average temperature in the last 2 billion years. And other than that, there have been very few points of stability between ice age and hothouse. There's one here really, really a long time ago. And this one that spawned several civilizations a few thousand years ago, where the temperature stabilized coming out of the Holocene for a few thousand years so far. But it looks like now we're headed within the next 10 years to a temperature at or near the highest temperature recorded by the planet in the last 2 billion years. During the Great Dying 252.2 million years ago, more than 90% of the species on the planet went extinct. Essentially all complex life on the planet went extinct because of that rapid rise in temperature. That rapid rise in temperature was somewhere between 880 and 18,800 years. And we're talking now about the same sort of temperature rise in a decade, or now 9 years from now. According to James Hansen, in a legal brief filed on the 12th of August in 2015, humans have been on the planet for about up to 2 degrees Celsius above the 1750 baseline. The global average temperature of the planet in 1750, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, was about 13.5 degrees Celsius, or about 1.5 degrees above ice age. So temperature rose about 1.5 degrees, stabilized for a few thousand years, and civilizations popped up all over the planet. And there's been some fluctuation in the last 200,000 years since our species has been here, going up to about 2 degrees above that 1750 baseline, according to James Hansen, the guy often called the grandfather of climate change. According to a synthesis of scientific research conducted by Oliver Tickell for The Guardian in August 2008, again reading the headline here, on a planet 4C hotter, and this is 4C above the 1750 baseline, all we can prepare for is extinction. And I suspect that headline is fairly conservative because we've only had habitat for human animals up to about 2 degrees above baseline. And so 4 degrees takes us about right there. We're currently right here where the blue line is. So we're getting pretty close to both of those numbers. Sam Carana, in that July 15th, 2016 essay, tallies up some of the contributors to global average temperature rise. He concludes that the temperature right now is 1.92 degrees above the 1750 baseline, the combination is 1.62 and 0.3, so 1.92 degrees above the baseline, the 1750 baseline. The consensus among the scientific community is that it's about 1.6 degrees Celsius. So I'll go with this consensus, even though recent refereed journal literature, which is very, very conservative, indicates that we're missing about 19% of the global average temperature rise since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So probably the 1.9 is closer than the 1.6, but I'm going to take a conservative approach here because we're talking about, after all, an outcome affecting our favorite species. So I'm going to take a very conservative approach to this whole analysis, to this whole synthesis. Because we know that the heating associated with carbon dioxide emissions, the maximum heating is lagged 10 years behind the emission. So carbon dioxide is emitted when we turn on the lights or when we turn on the internal combustion engine. And 10 years later, those molecules are exerting their maximum heating, their maximum blanket effect of holding down heat close to the planet. So that takes 10 years. So that adds another half a degree global average temperature rise. Actually half a degree due to carbon dioxide directly, and also another half a degree to the extra water vapor feedback. The moistening up of the upper troposphere, that's where most of the moisture on the planet ends up, and that's the far and away the most abundant greenhouse gas. More than 90% by volume of the greenhouse gases are comprised of water vapor. And that's a very fast feedback. So for every 1 degree resulting from carbon dioxide, we produce another 1 degree from moistening the upper troposphere, or the water vapor feedback. So half a degree here means a half a degree there too. So that means we're at conservatively 1.6, and we add another 1 over the course of the next 9 years from now. Those sulfates go up into the atmosphere and they serve as an umbrella. And so the incoming radiation from the sun is bounced up back into space before it has an opportunity to warm the planet and get trapped by the greenhouse gases. So if we stop burning greenhouse gases, we stop putting those sulfates up into the atmosphere. We stop burning carbon, especially coal. We stop putting the sulfates into the atmosphere, and we stop the umbrella effect. And when that happens, according to the refereed journal literature, that accounts for about a 3 degree C global average temperature rise in a matter of days. A matter of days. And we know this from research conducted September 14th, 2001, 3 days after 9/11. When the global average temperature signature of the Earth changed in 3 days because planes in the United States stopped flying. That's how sensitive the climate is. Changes can occur very rapidly. So Carana assumes 2.5. I think that's conservative, but I'll stick with it anyway instead of going with about 3, which is what the refereed journal literature says. And then there's more. There's albedo changes in the Arctic. Again, there's some indication that we might be able to overcome this, but geoengineering is not a viable solution, and civilization is a heat engine, after all. Then there's the decrease in albedo or reflectance from the Arctic, which according to Peter Wadham's 2012, will rise from about a half of a watt per square meter global average to over 2 watts per square meter as we approach an ice-free Arctic. Ice-free Arctic was predicted by the U.S. Naval Postgraduate College in analysis completed in 2013. They predicted an ice-free Arctic in 2016, plus or minus 3 years. It didn't happen in 2016. I'd say we dodged a bullet. It looks like we're on track for it to happen this September, perhaps as early as August, because the ice in the Arctic is going away so rapidly. And so that will come with it a tremendous increase in heating as a result of the absence of ice, and therefore the inability of the ice to reflect solar radiation back into space. In his recent book, Peter Wadham's, the book of his that just came out late last year, he takes a far less conservative approach and says albedo changes will be worse than that. But again, I'm interested in taking a conservative approach. Carana concludes a 1.1 degree temperature rise from seafloor methane, from the clathrates or hydrates bubbling up from the Arctic Ocean, from the relatively shallow seafloor in the Arctic Ocean, field researcher Natalia Shukova and her colleagues in 2008 at the European Geophysical Union meetings concluded that release of up to 50 gigatons of hydrate is highly possible for abrupt release at any time. That's almost a decade ago. I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet. But it hasn't. And so this would be responsible for 1.3 degrees global average temperature rise. Corona concludes 1.1. Not a big difference, but you start adding these things up, a half a degree here, 0.3 degrees here, 0.2 degrees here, so we're up to 1 degree global average temperature change, and that takes us from a very significant temperature rise to a very significantly catastrophic temperature rise in a span of only 9 years from now. I think it's far more likely that the ice-free Arctic, which appears probable this year or certainly no later than next year, will lead to this 50 gigaton burst of methane, the first 50 gigaton burst of methane, and therefore an abrupt global average temperature rise. Finally, I already mentioned the extra water vapor feedback equivalent to the carbon dioxide feedback, and the equilibrium is reached in a matter of a few days. And then there's also other feedbacks, further feedbacks, as Corona calls them, that he or she say account for only 0.3 degrees global average temperature rise. And I think that's insanely conservative, so I'll stick with that number. And here's an example, if I can get the video to play here. This is a video that shows terrestrial permafrost in Siberia, and reported on the Siberian Times. Some guy's gonna come along and bounce around on this jello-like substance that is supposed to be permafrost, but obviously is no longer permanently frozen. And then he'll dig his heel in, and if you listen very carefully at about the 12 or 15 second mark in this short video clip, you'll hear the hiss as pressurized methane and carbon dioxide come pouring out of the earth. And so to conclude that this sort of feedback, along with 6 dozen others that I know about, will account for only a 0.3 degree global average temperature rise, I think is quite conservative.
Do you need web access for that, Guy?
No.
Okay.
I need something, though, that isn't here, and that's okay. The bottom line, and you can go to the article posted at SiberianTimes.com on July 26th, 2016, and see this 20-second video clip. And a man comes out and pushes his heel into what looks like a trampoline. This grass is actually bouncing like jello or like a trampoline. Puts his heel into it, and I can't believe he does that, because he could have just as easily fallen into a hole and we never heard from him again. He sticks his heel into it, and you hear this psss over the sound of the wind, and that's pressurized methane and carbon dioxide coming out of the earth, directly out of the earth. It's quite impressive and worth a look. Bottom line, you put all these self-reinforcing feedback loops together in the absence of global dimming, and it looks like we're headed for this very rapid global average temperature rise. And we think that we can just keep doing things the same old way, and the kids will get along just fine. And I hear frequently from the millennial generation that they feel like they've been shit on their entire lives. They know what's going on, and they're supposed to be responsible for fixing it. They hear every day in their college classrooms that, hey, sorry, my generation screwed up, you're gonna have to fix this. A little more on that shortly. Again, apparently no human beings on the planet at about 2°C, and we're headed, if we take the very conservative approach, for a global average temperature rise right about at the level of hothouse Earth, or maybe even higher, up to about the range of the highest temperature recorded on the planet in the last 2 billion years. Now, in the approximately year since this paper came out, Sam Cran has done further analysis. And instead of taking this linear approach and adding things up, he says, what if we take an exponential approach instead? And he took this same approach 5 years ago and concluded that we were headed for a 4-degree global average temperature rise. It's 4 degrees Celsius above the 1750 baseline in 2030. And that number that he generated about 5 years ago has proven incredibly conservative. And yet he now concludes by extrapolating an exponential curve into the future, that we could be headed for that 10 degrees C global average temperature rise above the 1750 baseline as early as 2021. So I use this not to make the prediction that we will have a global average temperature rise that high in that short a period of time, but to indicate that it could happen and that reasonable people projecting in a reasonable manner are suggesting that it might actually happen. And the reason I do this, one of the reasons I do this, in addition to thinking it's important for you to have access to the full information, is that when I tell people about Karana's piece from June 15th, 2016, indicating that in 10 years, the temperature will be much higher than it is right now, and that most complex life on the planet won't be able to adapt in time. Most people hear that and they go, okay, so I'm gonna die July 14th, 2016 in my sleep. And that's not the case. It could be as little as 4 years. It could be that we have an ice-free Arctic, and that leads to the release of the first 50 gigaton burst of methane Natalia Shukova and her colleagues warned about in 2008. And that could lead to a global average temperature rise of 1.3 degrees Celsius. That would almost certainly collapse civilization, because we're then unable to grow grains this coming spring and fall. And because of the absence of global dimming, that leads to about a 6-degree rise. 3 times higher temperature than humans have occurred on the planet, with most of that temperature rise coming in a matter of months, not years. And so I don't see much way for humans to keep up. So that could happen as early as mid-2018. So I'm not predicting that it will, but I am suggesting that time is short. That Karana's analysis from about a year ago was conservative at the time and has been outstripped by additional data, by additional information. For that matter, we could have the long overdue collapse of American empire in September or October. Wouldn't surprise me at all. And then we get global dimming that takes us up to more than 4.5 degrees C global average temperature rise. And I don't see a lot of human beings surviving that, and certainly not in places like cities because of the collapse of civilization. On the other hand, we could all go out of here, walk outside, and get hit by an asteroid or hit by a bus all at the same time. My point is, time is short. The situation is urgent, and I suggest that we live with urgency instead of acting as if we always have another day. There are 7 days in the week, and someday is not one of them. And yet we throw that out all the time, don't we? When are you going to do this? When are you going to go do that? Someday. Someday. We don't have someday. A long time ago, the director of the New York office of the United Nations Environment Program said governments had a 10-year window of opportunity to fix this whole carbon dioxide thing. That was reported by the Associated Press, so it appeared in pretty much every newspaper in the country on the 29th of June, 1989. If I'm doing the math right, that was 28 years ago. And we had 10 years to solve it, or the situation spins out of human control. Guess what? Each of the last 4 years, anthropogenic or human-caused carbon dioxide emissions have declined because we're in the midst of a global recession. And yet, atmospheric carbon dioxide readings have increased exponentially each of those 4 years. It's almost as if the situation has spun out of human control, because it has, because of these self-reinforcing feedback loops. Back when the United Nations was a legitimate scientific organization in 1990, the United Nations Advisory Group on Greenhouse Gases reported that beyond 1 degree C, not 2, but beyond 1 degree C above the 1750 baseline, may elicit rapid, unpredictable, and nonlinear responses, like exponential responses, that could lead to extensive ecosystem damage. And this is really important because we're human animals and we depend upon habitat for our own survival. Most notably, we depend upon the ability to grow plants for our own survival. And without those plants to clean the water and clean the air and provide our food, we don't get along very long. David Spratt, climate writer and speaker, concludes in a video in October 2014 that a half a degree was probably a more reasonable estimate because we had already triggered so many self-reinforcing feedback loops at a half a degree. They're underway. The typical response to this information for all that time has been something like this. This is me. Just to be clear, I'm not immune. Neither are the rest of us. We were all born into captivity. We were born at a certain time in a certain place in history, born into enormous privilege for the most part, so that we can walk to the cliff's edge staring at our phones. They're phones, for crying out loud, and take us right over the cliff. We are in the midst of the sixth mass extinction in planetary history, as reported finally by the scientific community in 2015 with a paper in Science Advances titled Accelerated Modern Human-Induced Species Losses. If that isn't a mouthful from the scientific community, I don't know what is. Entering the sixth mass extinction, well, at that point there'd already been books written for 20 years about us being in the midst of the sixth mass extinction. My point is that the scientific community is incredibly conservative. The lead author of that paper, Gerardo Ceballos, said, quote, in an interview, life would take many millions of years to recover and our species itself would likely disappear early on. Well, he's certainly right about this. Each of the previous 5 mass extinctions, it has taken many millions of years for the planet to recover and have a vibrant, green planet again. But our species itself would likely disappear early on. Thank you. You almost lost me right there. I tell you, time is short. You never know when you're going to draw your last breath. Our species itself would likely disappear early on. We'll tell that to the United Nations report that came out in August 2010, indicating that at the time, 150 to 200 species were disappearing every day. 150 to 200 species going extinct every day since at least August 2010. So we're driving a lot of other species to extinction. Our species was not among the first to disappear. We are clever, but we can't survive without a living planet. And we're headed in that direction faster than expected. Good news, I do have a version with a happy ending. We all get to die. Oh, that's the good news. The good news is that we get to live. We actually get to die, and what that means is that we get to live. Think about this for a minute. We know a lot about DNA. We know enough about DNA to understand that the odds against any one of us being here in physical form exceed the odds against plucking a single atom from the entire universe at random. And yet here we are. Here we are, as Richard Dawkins says, with the eyes to see where we are and the brains to wonder why. It's pretty amazing. We get to live against truly cosmological odds. What are we going to do in that time? That's how I started this presentation, was pondering the question, what shall we do? And I suggest a few other things in the category of taking action. First of all, if you're calm, that you remain calm, and if you're not, maybe you should get that way, because nothing is under control. It's certainly not under our control. We do have some control over some individual events, like we can ruin somebody's day, and it's easy, right? That the people that we know, the people in our circle, in our families, people we interact with on a regular basis, we can ruin their day anytime. But for the most part, we don't, or we wouldn't be in that circle of people anymore. So we do have some control over the way we respond to information and the way we treat the people around us. Other than that, civilization and how many species it drives to extinction every day, that's not really up to us, is it? We don't get to vote on that. So the system grinds on regardless of our individual actions. I promote the pursuit of excellence, whatever that means to you as an individual. And that'll get you nowhere, I promise that. The pursuit of excellence in a culture of mediocrity will get you disparaged, insulted, and maybe even killed if you're lucky. It certainly has worked for me. You want to destroy your career? Pursue excellence. And finally, you know, it's funny, I say all these things and I'm serious, and people laugh. And when I say things that I think funny, people have this serious look on their faces. Must be my timing. And the other thing I encourage is the pursuit of love. These are actual things that we could do every single day. Do what you love. If you're not doing what you love, when are you going to do it? Someday? The day after tomorrow, maybe. I want to finish with a slide from a 25-year-old Serena Raphael, whose pictures magically disappeared. Say, only to speak for 36 minutes, the deep state comes in and starts removing my pictures. I thought we weren't connected to the internet. Serena Raphael, 25-year-old millennial from Western Australia, sends me this note. She says, "You've completely liberated my soul, freeing me. You've helped so many of us," and she's talking about millennials here. "We know it's past our control. It's okay. It wasn't our fault for being born. It's not our burden. Just live with excellence and do it to the best of your ability. Live now and love the precious time you have without fear and worry." Older generations, and this is a point I tried to make earlier, older generations must stop dumping it on us. We can't be expected to fix their messes. And yet I hear this all the time from my ex-colleagues in the academic community, telling their classrooms full of people, "Yeah, we made a lot of mistakes. Sorry about that. You're going to have to fix that. We crapped in your nest. It's up to you to fix it." That, of course, is completely irresponsible, and you might even argue insane. I've talked just a little too long here, and so I'll wrap right there. Thank you again, everybody, for making the trip, and especially to radish.org for hosting me, and Jamin in particular for setting this whole thing up. So I'll stay as long as you want, as Jamin already indicated. Thank you.
Guy, thank you so much. My goodness. Well, now you've all gotten a big taste of what I told you happened to me last December when I first got it via video, which is a bit more abstract, like, you know, okay, it's just another video. So I imagine the impact here may even be, Guy, is it typically stronger in person than via video? I imagine it is, yeah. So I just want to express first and foremost my empathy towards you all for whatever you must be, you know, thinking and feeling about all this. And, you know, it's a lot to take in, and of course, you know, immediately there are more questions than answers. But I just, one thing I want to point out is there are actually support groups for precisely this, you know, coming to terms with this data, this information, all the questions that come up, the fears, the doubts, etc. So I wanted to point out that Jenny Shore and company over here lead one such support group here in the Bay Area. So if you want more information about that, that's the table to go to, and either drop off your email address or whatever. Let me just do a quick time check. 8:49 p.m. Okay, so here's what we'll do. Since there are some folks who need to leave around 9, I think we may go a few minutes after 9. Is that okay with everyone? Any issues? Okay. And Guy, I'm going to rely heavily on you and Pauline to, you know, as we field questions. I'm just going to kind of facilitate here. This is hitting me in a whole new way because it's the first time I've gotten it in person. So feel free to just raise your hand. We are recording up here, so if anyone wants to come up and be on camera, you're certainly welcome to do so. Or if you want to, yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm just a little confused about what is the reason for expecting a sudden removal of the aerosol dimming effect? Are you expecting that we're going to burn a lot less, burning coal in the near future? And
Guy, if you don't mind coming to the mic, that would.
And I guess the corollary to that would be, could we buy ourselves some more time by burning more coal?
Now you're starting to sound like Michael Mann, who, when asked by Tom Hartman on RT, what do we do? He said, the first thing we need to do is keep burning coal. This is the leading climate scientist in the country, promoting the idea of burning coal. civilizations collapse because the global average temperature rises or falls catastrophically, locally. And that will certainly happen globally as well. One of the reasons for the 2-degree target being promulgated so seriously by an economist is that at that temperature above the 1750 baseline, it's expected that we'll be unable to grow grains at scale. And this civilization, like all others, depends upon the ability to grow and store grains at large scale. So it doesn't take much more of a global average temperature rise. In fact, there's an article in Truth out from approximately 2 years ago titled Agriculture on the Brink, and what it really meant was civilization on the brink. Because once temperature rises a little bit more, becomes unstable, we lose the ability to grow those grains at scale. You can't grow corn and wheat if the temperature's a little bit higher than it is right now, or a little bit lower than it is right now. We're right in the magic slot with a stable temperature at the right temperature for growing wheat and corn. And once we get out of that, you can't grow wheat and corn, and thus do civilizations collapse. Where I lived for several years in New Mexico, there was a culture called the Mimbres. The Mimbres culture was there for a few thousand years, and then in a span of 20 years, they discovered corn, or maize, went into overshoot regionally, completely collapsed with a few survivors, and from then on decided to forsake corn. 20 years from the discovery of maize to the complete collapse of that civilization. And it's easy to imagine. In fact, it was Ben Bernanke, then chairman of the Federal Reserve System, in February 2011, who said, looking back to 2008, 2009, he said, we were within the blink of an eye of losing every bank in the United States except one. And he didn't say which one, but it probably was the Federal Reserve Bank. You know, and those banks, a bunch of those banks are called too big to fail for a reason. If we lose one, the whole house of cards comes down. The situation has not gotten any better since then. If you look at debt, if you look at leverage, if you look at any number of macroeconomic factors, the system teeters on the brink. So we could lose that global dimming in a short period of time from the lack of aerosols when civilization suddenly, or as has been going on so far, slowly grinds to a halt. Jamie, thanks for the question.
And I also want to, there are a lot of technical questions, obviously, and we could go on for hours just on the technical. What I was kind of inviting more of, though you're certainly welcome to ask technical questions, I'm also just encouraging people to kind of, if you feel like it, share how, how this is landing, or ask, yeah, question. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Has Guy ever considered putting together an international conference, perhaps located in D.C., to discuss these issues?
The question is, has Professor McPherson ever considered putting together an international conference, perhaps in Washington, D.C., to discuss these issues?
I don't think you realize how broke I am. I got no money. I have no influence. I've been monitored by the CIA since at least 1996. Spy in my classroom, NSA contracted spy in my classroom since 2005. I'm not really in a position to organize international conferences. I would encourage you to do the same.
To not organize?
No, to organize. Well, and it's precisely out of the same motivation that we organized this talk right here in the East Bay Sierra Club dinner. So I want us to give everyone here a big hand. Give yourselves a big hand. Let's give our. And because think about it, I mean, if we have a chance, on one point, Guy and I agree, which is that if we're going to save ourselves from this predicament, it's going to take miracles. We agree on that. And I think that revolution is going to be a part of at least one of those miracles. Well, here we are in the land of revolutions, the San Francisco Bay Area. So it's time to, you know, get one more for the Gipper, shall we say. Yes, question. Mm-hmm. Oh, is there a question? Yeah, I've got a big bright. Yes, go ahead. Yes, you.
Okay. Here's my question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's my question. So, for those of us who are, I work with Citizens Climate Lobby. We're trying to get a fully rebated national price on all fossil fuels, a tax on fossil fuels. James Hansen's on our board. Michael Mann was at our conference last year. Strongly support this approach. They believe, and I would assume that they believe that this approach can help the situation. I'm just wondering, are you saying that it's not really worth working on solutions at this point?
I'm just going to repeat the question. The bottom line is, given that, so carbon tax is on the table. I'm just saying this for the recording and for the rest of the folks. A carbon tax, a tax on carbon is promoted as a significant solution to this, but are you saying that we're beyond hope and it's pointless to even pursue solutions at this point?
We've always been beyond hope, that four-letter word, and it is not, nor is it ever, too late to take actions. What better measure of our character than how we act in the face of impossible odds? And that's what we're facing. It's impossible. As nearly as I can tell, it's impossible, based upon the evidence, that there will be a human being on the planet within a very short period of time from now. Does that mean we should roll over and die? Contrary to what you read on the internet, I've never said that. I started with a slide that says something like action is the antidote to despair. I encourage action. I also encourage people not to be too attached to the outcome of those actions, because I really, really, really think we're all going to die, and that our species, like every other one, will go extinct, and that both will come as a major surprise to most people. Because we never talk about either of those things in this culture. So when somebody's on their deathbed, it's shocking to them, and most people deny it until they take their last breath. Of course you're going to die. Of course we're going to go extinct. I think it's going to happen really, really fast. All the evidence supports that. Does that mean I want you to die? No, it means I want you to live. Not wait for someday to live and to take what a Buddhist would call right action. And there are many. And I don't think it matters. But do it anyway, even if it doesn't matter. When nothing matters, everything matters even more. Take right action. That's what you've always wanted to do anyway. That's what we're all told to do. That's what we want to do in our hearts and our souls and our brains, is to do what's right. And is it going to make everything better? No. Is it going to make us live longer? No. Is it going to make us be able to look ourselves in the mirror at the end of the day? Yeah. Isn't that what this is all about? The ability to look yourself in the mirror at the end of every day? If it's not about that, then I don't know what the hell it's about. Because for me, that's what it's about.
We need to party.
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Yes, we more and more read about the pollinators, and I heard on PBS radio the other day, they were saying that before all this even happened, that what with the extinction so quickly now of the birds and the bees and the bats, which are the main three pollinators, of course, that if they die, none of the fruits or vegetables can grow without pollinators, and that if we don't have the food and the things to eat because things haven't been pollinated, we'll die right away also. But this same program, I only got in on the tail end of it, so I wanted to bring up the second thing, and I didn't quite understand this. It said we're on an angle, the Earth is on an angle, and that with the melting of the glaciers and with the icebergs and everything, that there's such rapid melting that the amount of water and the warmer water killing not only all the fish and the things that live in the ocean and all the pollution and plastic and everything in the ocean, that with the ocean dying with the acidity and the destruction of the coral reefs, and that the planet itself is tilting and coming, what's the angle? I don't remember the number now, but it's going to fall, that it'll tilt over and turn upside down. And this man was some scientist of some renown, but have you heard anything about the planet turning upside down?
The planet turning upside down. Guy, can you shed some light on that?
I'm not an astrophysicist. However, the current tilt, 23.5 degrees, is increasing as a result of melting glaciers, as a result of losing ice. So there is a, quote, polar shift going on as a result of ongoing climate change, notably abrupt climate change. I was going to make a joke about how it's always the women who bring up the birds and the bees and turn out to be an ultimate bummer, but I'm going to skip that joke. But yes, there is some increased tilt going on that is affecting the planet, but it's currently a problem for the occasional airline pilot, but beyond that, I don't think it's something we need to worry about compared to habitat for our whole species going away.
How about the problem with the bees?
The bees,
Yeah, it's a big deal. I mean, we depend upon all these other species, including those that provide, quote, ecosystem services, like pollination. That's where we get our food from, is these pollinators. Albert Einstein was once incorrectly quoted as saying that 4 years after there's no bees, there will be no humans, right? But he didn't actually say that. But it's smart, so it sounds like something he could have said. And we're losing the pollinators at an astonishing rate because of the birds and the bees, as you mentioned, and the bats too, going away. Because all complex life is going away because the species can't keep up with the ongoing profound shifts in climate. So yeah, we're screwed, and we're getting screweder every day. Soon we'll be screwedest. And those aren't even words, I just made them up.
Careful, Guy, or people will start calling you Scrooge. There are a lot of questions, and I encourage all the questions. We will get to all of your questions. I just want to comment on something I mentioned at the beginning, which is because of the very nature of this, we're going to go long. There are folks who do need to leave around now, and but as promised in the program, we were going to cover both the topic of everything that Professor McPherson has covered, as well as the topic of solutions. So what I'm going to offer, and I'll go with the consensus, so just be ready to say yes or no. I'd like to offer to give kind of a 5-minute sort of accelerated summary of the whole topic of solutions. That way, okay, I'm hearing positive feedback. That way the folks who need to go can go, having heard the at least a summary, which will be a good one, about solutions. Then we can kind of take a little break, let people who need to go and say their goodbyes and whatnot, and then we reconvene. We can then continue with questions. And then, as time permits, towards the end, I'll go even deeper into solutions, which I'm excited to do, because I can't just sit back and say, okay, we're all going to die, and I'm not going to do anything about that. Everybody good with that? I heard enough claps, and I'm feeling it. Okay. Anyone strongly opposed? Apparently not. Okay, good. All right. So so I'm about to give a 5-minute, just super condensed summary of what I have to say about solutions. As I said, Guy and I agree that if we're going to save ourselves from this predicament, take miracles. So let me first just talk about the nature of these miracles that it might take. Obviously, there are kind of different categories of miracles. One that I'm just learning about is consciousness and consciousness hacking, and the kind of stuff that Heart Math Institute, many of you have probably heard of them, and other organizations have really been pushing the boundaries of consciousness and affecting the global consciousness. So that's one realm in which miracles may exist. Another, thank you, Pauline. You want that in my pocket? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. You can just drop it in there. Technology. All right, thank you. Another realm is in the area of energy. For example, fission. If we can find a way to have carbon-free energy, that would be one realm in which potential miracles could exist. Not to suggest that would solve all of our problems. I don't think Guy would agree with that, and I wouldn't either. But that's the order of magnitude of the miracles that we need at this point. Little tweaks to agriculture and industry and transportation are simply not going to carry the day. We need major miracles. Another realm in which miracles could happen could be in the realm of social and political revolution, which I think, you know, one could make strong cases for those. The one category, and there are many other categories of miracles. I've just touched on a few, right, of possible miracles. And the one that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to focus on, is really a two-part thing, and I'll cover it in the next 4 minutes. The first part is what I think of and discuss as a platform for generating solutions, including but not limited to the miraculous. And then I want to talk briefly about solutions, just solutions generally. The platform that I refer to is a platform based on a new set of, it's not just technologies, it's a transformation in culture, it's a transformation in how we relate to each other, and fundamentally it's a transformation in what it means to be human. And this whole category of miracles we call radical collective intelligence. Now, collective intelligence is a field unto itself. MIT, where I was a graduate student back in the day in hydroclimatology, that's how passionate I am about the whole range of topics that Guy has been covering. MIT has a whole center for collective intelligence. In fact, they published this handbook on collective intelligence. There are some amazing books published on some of the technologies and methods of collective intelligence. Perhaps the most important is this book called Reinventing Discovery, The New Era of Networked Science. And then there are other books such as Professor Sawyer's book Group, and many, many others. And what's happening is we're at a point where the evolution of information and communication technologies is growing exponentially. And that presents, just to give one example, the whole range of technologies, including augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, which my buddy and colleague Michael Gosney is putting on a major event about on July 1st, the Digital Be-In. Highly recommend it, I'll be there. And that whole realm, combined with all the other realms of video conferencing and all the communication and information technologies, is creating an opportunity for us to architect a platform of radical collective intelligence, radical meaning that we're able to take that platform and burrow down to the very roots of our problems, which are, of course, extremely severe. And through this platform and through a self-reinforcing feedback loop that I will detail when we get into more details, we will kick off an exponential growth in collective intelligence. And I often make the analogy, in the Cambrian explosion, we, life on planet Earth, went from unicellular to multicellular, all the way up the food chain to us and big whales and whatnot. Likewise, we're about to make a radical transformation from unicranial intelligence. We measure intelligence at the level of, oh, he's really smart. Oh, you know, she's really creative, right? It's all about me, 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 me. The ego, which one could argue is the root of most if not all of our problems. We're going to make a Cambrian explosion from unicranium to multicranium, or collective intelligence, but not just haphazardly emerging social media and just the internet generally. There's been this emerging collective intelligence. What we're talking about is an intentionally architected and in fact optimized platform for precisely orchestrating an exponential rise in collective intelligence. This exponentially growing intelligence in absolute magnitude is something we can barely conceive of, right? And that exponentially growing intelligence will generate the solutions and in fact the miracles. This is what I'm betting on. I can't guarantee it, but it's what I predict and I believe in. It will generate the solutions and, in fact, the miracles that we need to have a fighting chance against this Death Star that's descending upon us and seeks to destroy us. Perhaps not intentionally. I don't think the CO2 molecules up in the atmosphere are like, have evil intentions. But it's what's happening, and it's what we must face. So I'll go into more details on that later. But first, I want to mention some of what this collective intelligence, albeit not in its pure form that we envision and that we're hot on the trail of architecting and building and launching, but what existing forms of collective intelligence have created for combating precisely these problems. The most recent is a book called Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming, edited by Paul Hawken, who's going to be speaking on Monday, I'm pretty sure in Marin, and I'll be there, and I encourage everyone to come. And I encourage people to take a look at this book. In fact, I might just pass it around. So this is what the collective intelligence has so far produced, but we have not yet begun to fight. We have not yet begun to scratch the surface of the potential of really, truly putting our heads and our hearts together. And technology is going to facilitate it, but really it's coming from us at its core. Technology is going to vastly accelerate it, but it's human-based intelligence. It leverages artificial intelligence as a tool set, but it's really based on our own intelligence and this transformation in humanity, which is not only possible, but I would argue crucial. Not crucial to guarantee our survival, but crucial to give us a fighting chance against this Death Star that's descending upon us very quickly and very cruelly. So that's the short summary. Stick around if you want to go deeper, but first I want to honor the questions that everyone has. But even before that, I want to thank Professor Guy McPherson and Pauline for making the long trip from Belize to be here. I want to thank all of you for being here and supporting this amazing presentation and work. And thank you all. So I've just been surrounded by great scientists and engineers. So I know great scientists and engineers when I see them. And I know phonies when I see them. When I saw Professor McPherson's talk, I knew instinctively, intuitively, and from all my experience, he is the real deal. And I cross-referenced and looked up some of the data that he was citing and research, and found that he has exhaustive support for every assertion that he makes, peer-reviewed scientific conclusions reached by others based on the facts. So when I saw this, I knew, for me, it was a massive red flag. It didn't answer all my questions, obviously, and questions keep coming up, but it was a massive warning to me. And my life has never been the same since that moment. So I just want to share that for me, it was just a radical impact and transformation. And I would wake up every morning after that just with this sick feeling that we're going down and I need to do something about it. And so I've been living with this urgency and emergency, this sense of emergency ever since then. And that's what inspired me to reach out, even though I didn't know Guy. I reached out and said, hey, we'd love to have you up and speak for us at the Sierra Club dinner. Would you be willing? And so, and I've also just been taking lots of other actions, really pushing for the evolution of this radical collective intelligence that I mentioned a few minutes ago. So for myself, it's been just absolutely transformational. And things that I've done things that I wouldn't have dreamed of doing since learning of all this and getting deeper into it. So I just wanted to share, kind of kick off this share-a-thon, just sharing from my own experience. And I invite Guy, Pauline, anyone and everyone to share and ask anything.
Well, there are a couple of people who have been on this road with me for some period of time. Peter and Jenny and Herb and maybe others that I don't know about or don't recall. So I'd rather have somebody else talk besides me, certainly besides you. You know, no offense.
Shall we just answer some questions?
Yeah.
Since you kinda
Yeah, absolutely.
said, so I think
Yeah.
he had his hand up.
Yeah, why hasn't capitalism been mentioned? You know, you've mentioned that an infinitely expanding system doesn't work on a finite planet. Well, what do we have with capitalism? It's an infinitely expanding system. It mines fossil fuels, produces commodities, uses the fossil fuels to transport the commodities for sale all over the world. And I think that's the key source of global warming, but we haven't, and climate change, but it hasn't even been mentioned. So what do you think about that?
Well, I just think, I mentioned civilization because it encapsulates all those isms. Socialism didn't work.
Yeah. Well,
That's pretty
that was a
evident.
particular
Capitalism
type of
isn't working.
Well, eco-socialism, that is ecological socialism based on nature, could maybe work, but anyway, go ahead.
Well, that's why I don't mention capitalism, because I think it's a subset of the overall underlying root of the predicaments in which we're embroiled. So I mentioned the overarching term, civilization, to refer to the set of living arrangements.
What do you think of the argument that capitalism, with its mining of fossil fuels, using them to transport commodities for sale and produce commodities, is the heart of the problem?
Well,
You don't
isn't
think
it
it is?
population that's really
It's
the heart?
everything.
Yeah.
I mean, how far back do you want to go? To when we started carrying around fire, when we came out of the trees? I mean, I don't know at what point we took the critical misstep. Was it language? Some people say that it's language and tools. 2.8 million years ago, from that point forward, we were absolutely screwed. There's no hope. Could be. Or maybe it's the development of civilizations just a few thousand years ago. Those were the critical steps or the critical misstep. Maybe it's capitalism as misinterpreted from Adam Smith's work, right?
How
So
about
I don't know.
How about science?
How about technology as a
Yeah,
form of science, not science as a way of knowing per se?
Prolong our lives, I mean.
Right, but that's technology. So it could be that technologies, which always produce more problems than solutions, can be pointed to as the bad guys as well.
Well,
Science
we
is
used
a
to-
way of knowing.
I mean, we
Technology is one of the
used to live to
outcomes.
40 years old, you know,
Yeah.
100 years ago, so,
Right, so we live longer.
yeah.
And it's the combination, as pointed out by ecologists in the 1960s, our ecological footprint is a combination of multiplication of the number of people, population, and how much they consume. And so that brings in capitalism, the promotion of consume. So of course it's a combination. Could we have 100 million people living sustainably on the earth if they lived a certain way? Yeah, maybe that could have happened. But it's not gonna happen anymore. And so constantly looking for the wrong turn that we took. You know, as a species, even as a genus, I think the genus Homo has made a few million, has come to a fork in the road a few million times. And we took the wrong turn every time so far. And I don't know that we can point to 1 or 2 or 7 to say this is it. If we've just not done this, right? So, and I think it's all kind of moot anyway. Now we're at the point where what do we do as individuals in society, given where we're at and where we're almost certainly headed in the very near future? What do we do?
What takes you to Belize?
What takes me to Belize? Well, I'm actually beginning to live my message that love matters, and I love not living in this country. I'm back here for 24 hours. I see the fascists running the show. I see people getting arrested for being, I see people getting harassed for being black in America, which apparently has been illegal for a long time. But never is it more obvious than when you've been out of the country for a while and you come back in. So I got so many issues with this country, I don't even know where to start, and I don't want to start since there's, 100 people here who actually live in this country, and me.
Yes, Susan.
Thank you. I had my hand. I just had a technical question. So I'm going back to a detail that you presented on the culture that was living in Mexico with the corn, and within a very short period of time they were done. And I wasn't sure what period of time, and I wasn't sure what that was. That was a local done this? And was it a raping of the soil, or what was it?
So that was the Membrace culture, and it was about 900 years ago when the Membrace discovered corn, or corn discovered them. And 20 years later, there was no more Membrace culture. There were a very few survivors who walked away, but they grew a lot of corn in a short period of time, went almost immediately into human population overshoot because they had this extra energy. They could get through the drought that used to last 1 year or 2 or 3 years. They could get through the wet winter. They could have a crop failure because they had all this grain accumulated. And so they're using that extra energy to make babies. And so the next thing you know, in the area that the Membrace lived, and back in those days, even as little as 1,000 years ago, all populations and all politics were actually local. They couldn't expand outside of their range because there were all kinds of other tribes and bands that wouldn't allow that, that would violently respond should they try to move out beyond the Membrace Valley and the Gila Valley in New Mexico. So that the Chacoan culture to the north was keeping them where they were. So locally or regionally, depending upon how you want to spin this story, they went into population overshoot. They grew too much corn too fast, and there's too many people eating every single edible thing on the landscape. And so then they get to year 17 with corn, and they eat the seed corn. And they get to year 18, and it's the second year of the drought. And now the seed corn is all gone, and almost everybody dies. And they get to year 19, and they're down to 18 people. And then year 20, and the few people scatter and go back to hunting and gathering where they can scrabble by. And there were several thousand people just 4 years earlier. And that's how quickly it can occur.
Was it the human nature of just enjoying the bounty without sort of living in a more measured way and sort of over-dependence on the corn? Whereas hopefully if we're a little more wizened with enough cultures under history that we can learn from that if we live in a very measured way. For instance, they're finding ways in India to be doing in very measured ways how to have a particular crop but not over-dependence on it, and you know what I mean? Not articulate.
Have you noticed what we've done with fossil fuels? Measured is not the term that comes to mind for me.
Do we really need wheat? I mean, gluten is not real good for us.
We don't need
I mean,
we don't need 90% of what every person in this room has. We don't need any of that. Who's going to give it up? Seeking volunteers? I've been seeking volunteers for a really long time.
I'll give up some
Okay,
stuff.
so we each now will give up some stuff, but it's too late. We're over the cliff. We're Wile E. Coyote, and we just haven't looked down. Don't start negotiating now. 3 Days of the Condor was a great movie. It came out in 1973, and the final scene shows the good spy and the bad spy, and they're talking about what's going to happen. And the good spy says, "We need to tell the people. We need to tell the American people, because then they'll do it." And the bad spy says, "No, you can tell them. Absolutely, you tell them, but don't tell them in advance. Tell them when they're in the grips of the crisis.
Yeah, not
See how they're going to
until
respond then." And this was 1973, when the United States was facing its first, quote, oil crisis. What did we learn from that? We learned the Carter Doctrine. The Carter Doctrine, perhaps Jimmy Carter was perhaps the last decent man in the Oval Office based on his daily actions. And the Carter Doctrine, the doctrine that bears his name, says, with respect to oil in the Middle East, that's our oil over there. And by extension, everything else on the planet. That's what we learned from the oil crisis, is we need to have a bigger military. That's what empires do. And just because you give it up, just because I give it up, I went to the desert, I grew a bunch of food. I couldn't distinguish between a zucchini and a screwdriver when I started that project, and I learned how to do it. We can all go along and do that, but it's too late. It was probably too late then, a dozen years ago when I started that project. It's certainly too late now. At some point, you have to recognize that your days are actually numbered.
Yes, sir.
I'm not ready to recognize my days are numbered. You're talking about civilizations failing, which they certainly have done. And I don't know much about the reasons why they failed. But the point is that the species has continued, even though civilizations have failed. So it has been my opinion that the species will not go extinct, although there may be an extremely large decrease in the population, because I think we have the ability to manipulate our environment and the creative ability that is beyond other species. So I think it may end up that 99% of humans are eliminated by a disease or by some other mechanism, but I don't see the species disappearing, because so there's a 10-degree rise in global temperature. I mean, people are living in the tropics in much, you yourself. It's a lot hotter there. It's not a problem, but it's 10 degrees hotter. I understand that there are all these other feedback loops that we cannot exactly predict. So do you have a mechanism by which you feel the species will go extinct?
I don't know when you're going to die or what you're going to die from. But I do know that without complex life on the planet, no humans survive. Food is particularly convenient. I'm a big fan. Clean water is huge. And an atmosphere without ionizing radiation is kind of important. There's 440 some nuclear power plants around the globe.
I was just going to say, what happens when there's only 1% of the population? Who's going to take care of the nuclear power plants on the planet? Are we going to just be lucky enough to have nuclear physicists to run them?
No, we're not going to.
I mean, where the hell with it?
We don't have that energy.
So if I could just...
That's what I'm saying, but if they're here and everybody disappears, they would just melt down. Who would then survive?
So yes, we're headed for a Fukushima times 442 sort of environment, but even without that information, even with a few Fukushimas on the horizon, according to the Jason Group in the Pentagon, and these are the smartest people in the room, we're headed for a Mars-type planet, no atmosphere, not Venus, but Mars, with no atmosphere as early as 2054, as a result of a little bit of ionizing radiation and abrupt climate change. So I don't see humans being the last species on the planet. There's a microbe that lives 7 miles beneath the surface of the planet. It's a microbe. I think they'll be here after we're gone. I think methane-eating bacteria and methane-eating microbes probably will be here after humans are gone. But even they will not last forever. All is impermanent.
As Joni Mitchell said, we're stardust.
Yes.
And this woman had her hand up. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just have a question for Guy, which is, you could have come here and we could have just had a love fest. And so I don't quite understand what your goal is tonight with us. I mean, do you want us all to go home and kill ourselves? I really need to know your goal.
When your medical doctor knows that there's a 99.99% chance you're going to be dead in a month, he doesn't tell you that. We have a word for that, don't we? It's called malpractice. I'm not going to do that.
Well, then why did you come?
Because you deserve to know.
I'm asking him. I'm asking him.
Because
We're kind of glad that he's here, though.
Let's let him answer. Let's think. Go ahead.
Because I believe you have a right to know. To be reminded that you're going to die and that Homo sapiens is a species that's going to go extinct, and it's going to happen faster than expected. I think you have a right to know all of the evidence that is being hidden from you by the mainstream media and the governments of the world. I'm not doing this for sport. People come up to me all the time before a presentation and they say, how are you gonna die? And I say, you know, I have a long list of people who I want dead, but I'm not on that list. I don't do this for money. I don't do this for power. I don't do this for pleasure. I do this because I'm the doctor who is reminding you that you depend upon a stable environment for your survival, and that will soon be gone. I think you have a right to know that. I think it's my obligation as a conservation biologist to tell you that. As with every other tour I've ever been on, I will lose money on this tour. I could be spending my time in Belize with the people I love on 57 acres and actually enjoying my life. But I came here because I think you have a right to know. That's why I'm here. That's my goal, is to form. That's what teachers do.
Do you also think it's going to help?
I think there's a very, very high probability that it will help to the people who listen. That last slide that was on the screen for the whole time Shaman was talking is evidence that some people benefit from this information. That I actually liberate them, that I set them free, that I remind them that it's not their fault, and I remind them that their life is short, and they might want to live with urgency. Yes, for some people this will help.
But not towards activism, but for inner peace of each individual to be able to calibrate how they want to live their last days. Is that right?
In any number of ways, by being relieved of the burden that it's your fault. That the no guilt, no shame, no blame approach, that you were born into a set of living arrangements and you didn't have a choice. That if you're a millennial, it can't be all dumped on you and blamed on you because you don't fix the unfixable predicaments created by your progenitors. There's all kinds of reasons that I can give that I think the information I'm relaying is beneficial. How you accept it, how you respond to that is entirely up to you. Some days I wish somebody would just come up and kill me for it and put me out of my damn misery, and yours too. That was a joke. Some of you people don't laugh at any of the right times. I mentioned this before.
Oh, Amanda has a question. Yeah.
I just wanted to make a point and kind of maybe lead to a question, because I come from a population of people who have always, well, in my memory frame, have always lived under uncertainty and environmental stressors that can't be predicted necessarily. Always lived under the thumb of others, the will of others and other establishments. So I think this is a really auspicious time for a person like me, because finally perhaps you all, others who are not like me, let's just say that way, will be able to really step out of your normal way of thinking and realize that there's populations of people on this planet who are always living under the constant environmental duress, the changes. There are people that can thrive under those changes, genetically can thrive. I think on the topic of Black Lives Matter, which is kind of a weird movement, but it's a movement nonetheless that's important. Maybe it's time for us to shift our focus out of our own minds into that collectivism is where it's at right now, because of the fact that maybe the status quo does not have the answer and has been ruining this planet. So we should maybe do the best that we can to stop identifying in that status quo. Step out of that, realize there's other people that exist out there under extreme duress, can still thrive, access those people, bring them into the consciousness, and then think again. And then you move.
Gentleman back there with a hand up.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Okay, well, there is a point that hopefully will lead to a discussion. People have mentioned a 10-degree temperature rise in how humans
Well, they survive in different parts of the planet with warmer conditions, and besides we have air conditioners and what. But that would do. But the reality is that it's not just up to humans. We're part of an ecosystem. If the ecosystem doesn't survive, we don't survive. There are many, many other creatures upon which we depend. And perhaps that's something that's always been understated in terms of global warming, because people only see a temperature rise and then they think, well, my relatives live in Houston. I mean, if they can handle it, I can handle it. But that's it.
If you can live in Houston, you can put up with damn near anything.
Flying kite.
Americans, in my experience, have a way of thinking in kind of binaries, and media helps this. You know, you're either partisan for this or partisan for that. There's a lot of hate and so on. Yeah. But scientists, at best, I think with a certain amount of humility and in probability distributions and so on. So I wonder, would you give a probability of our survival as a species, at least a few members of the species? And that leads into Jamin's side, where maybe there's some way that we can do some kind of mental miracles. And so what chance would you give it that there's an outside chance that we would have a survival mechanism if we think differently?
When? It all
Within the next period of time before we go extinct on your measures.
all species go extinct. Ours will.
10 years, 9 years.
Okay.
50.
Okay, 50, I'd say there's a 99.999999999% chance that there won't be a human being on the planet. 9 years, I'd say that's only 99.99% chance there won't be a human being on the planet. And if there is, it won't be any of us. It'll be some sociopath or a collection of sociopaths. Wouldn't that be fun? Living in a bunker or bunkers.
Yeah.
So with water and food and so on. But so what? When they come out, they're coming out to a dead planet. It will take many millions of years for the planet to recover. Do you really want to be in the bunker with those sociopaths?
So let me ask
Is
you
that your idea of a good time?
How can you be so sure? That seems a little bit arrogant to be so sure of how the future's going to be.
I said it was only 99.9.
You gotta laugh.
And as I've pointed out only a dozen times, there are actions that we can be taking that I promote that we take. That action is the antidote to despair, that there's all kinds of reasons for taking actions we don't, that hope and despair are the twin sides of the I don't know the future coin. I've said all these things indicating that I believe we must take action and act with urgency. And it's okay that nobody hears those ever because I have them on tape. I know I do. I'm not sure what you're looking for. Are you looking for? I wasn't going to say it. I was searching for another word, but.
It's like
Go ahead.
It's like a time and a date. It's like everybody wants a time and a date.
Right. Everybody wants to know when they're going to die.
I'm looking for one. So I read up on climate science a little bit, and so I kind of I'm aware of some of the facts that are in play. It's a desperate, horrible, urgent, miserable situation, clearly. But there are a lot of really smart climate scientists that think that we don't have extinction in our near future. We have desolation. Like Hansen will say, the civilization becomes ungovernable. These are huge, awful things. But I don't hear extinction from hardly anyone else.
Right. Well, part of the reason for that is that there's almost no climate scientists who know anything about conservation biology. The pillars of conservation biology are speciation, extinction, and habitat. And I don't hear an astronomer and physicist, oh, those are James Hansen's degrees. I don't hear those people talking about habitat.
But you go to an AGU conference, there are a tremendous number of people talking about habitat range and how it's changing. They're really clear on how their field is being impacted by climate change, but they don't talk about extinction.
No, it's quite a tragedy, I think. That nobody will even talk about the death of their grandmother in this culture. Of course they're not going to talk about extinction. It's strictly taboo. It's off the table. It's not, you might as well talk about human bodily functions at an AGU conference. That's not gonna come up either. Somebody might ask where the restroom is, but that's as far as that's gonna go. I can't tell you why other people cannot reach the obvious conclusion that we're headed for a temperature, a global average temperature, 1 to 3 orders of magnitude faster than has ever occurred before, leading to a global average temperature rise higher than at any point, not just in human history on the planet, but in the last 2 billion years of planetary history. And people can't put together 1 minus 1 and come up with none. I can't speak for other climate scientists on this issue. I don't know what the hell they're thinking about beyond their own paychecks or their own university positions. That might have a little to do with it.
Yes, sir.
Hi, who's here, like an officer from the Sierra Club? Who's a person from the Sierra Club who's responsible for him being here?
Well, I'm responsible for him being here. I'm not an officer of the Sierra Club, not by the Sierra Club. I'm here in a volunteer capacity as program chair of the East Bay Sierra Club dinners.
Because I'm curious why, when I wanted to come here, I had to search through in-depth menus to even find that he was going to be here. When he's only talking about the end of the world, I don't see why that doesn't make front page news on the Sierra Club website. You know, I just don't get it. I mean, we're going to go plant some trees over here, we're going to clean up the beach over there, but I just don't get why. I mean, he can't find any traction anywhere with mainstream anything. Yet, you know, even supposedly his allies don't put him out there. So I'm curious why that might have been.
Well, he has a ton of traction with me and with my organization and our supporters.
It's
members.
not a webpage, nowhere.
No, I don't represent the Sierra Club. I represent radish.org. I'm just saying, he has traction with us. He definitely has traction with us. And I can't speak for any other organization.
And I certainly can't either. But Peter can.
I've been assisting Guy in spreading this message for over 3 years now. But to address your question, maybe it's true that the Sierra Club didn't put it big and bold enough that this was going to be X-rated, if you will, right? But there was terminology in the description that said 6 mass extinction and that he's the leading voice of abrupt climate change. So I understand your point. It could have and maybe even should have been more clearly a warning. Is that what you're thinking should have been?
He's saying that he couldn't even find
No,
it.
No, but hang on. What were you asking, sir?
Well, it's just an observation that
because nobody wants to hear about it. Nobody wants to hear it. That's why.
Let me paraphrase.
But this was
just
just
nobody
so
else
obvious.
in charge of the website. Peter, just to paraphrase, his question was, why didn't the Sierra Club publicize this more broadly? It is kind of hard to find, as you and I know. So that's his question. He's saying, hey, wait a second, this is really big news for the Sierra Club audience, right? Why didn't this go out bigger and broader? I think does that paraphrase?
Basically, yeah. Because I had a conversation with him in the bathroom, and he was saying we have no allies. Not Neil deGrasse Tyson or Bill Nye. None of them really are willing to entertain the idea of the gravity of what might be coming down the pike. And not even the people who ask him to come here seem to want to really, you know, because we need, it's time to scare people. People need to get scared and.
But do they? I mean, what's going to happen?
Informed at least.
Well,
right?
one small correction. Bill Nye actually did have Professor McPherson on his show and interviewed him for several minutes and then went back to talk with Arnold Schwarzenegger about it. I'm not joking. It's on YouTube.
Next question.
Oh, the red cap. This gentleman in the red cap, yeah. And I'll get to you, Michael, yeah.
I'm a scientist. I have a degree in chemistry. I taught a couple years of science, 30 years of math, high school math. And I think that people have trouble getting the whole picture. You have people like him come along and they sound like alarmists. You only have 4 years left, or 10 years, and that people can't relate to that. It's because they don't understand the situation of the structure of the earth and population increase. And so, well, some of the main problems, okay? Population is increasing 1 billion people in about 11 years, okay? At first it was taking hundreds of years to have another 1 billion people, then 50 years, then 20, now it's down to 11 years. And although there was a slight improvement in the last 11 years, it was something like 11.5 years to have another 1 billion, and it changed to 11.6. We gained a month in the last decade or so. So you have that many more people. Now at the same time, we're trying to switch to solar and wind power, hydrogen, and all these things that don't burn carbon. We're trying to switch over from all the carbon stuff we're burning, and in 11 years there's going to be another 1 billion people using more energy.
Yeah, we've talked about population. Do you have another point besides population? Or do you have a question, more importantly? I know it's getting later and...
Okay, then the other thing is, he's talking about the atmosphere heating up, right? That's the main problem. Okay, people don't understand how thin the atmosphere is around the Earth, okay? 90% of the atmosphere goes up to 50,000 feet. That's 10 miles, okay? 10 miles. The next 50,000 feet is the other 10%. So 90% of it is 10 miles high. What fraction of the Earth's diameter is that? The Earth is 8,000 miles across. The atmosphere sticks up 10 miles. 10 over 8,000 reduces to what? 1/800th. The atmosphere is a thin film around the Earth, 1/800th as thick as the Earth. So if you're out there in space, you're looking at the Earth, the atmosphere sticks up 1/800th of that circle.
Yeah.
It's a very thin film.
You make an excellent point that there's so many parts of science that need to come together to understand, and we're, as a species, pretty clueless.
You're having 1 billion more people every 11 years, and you're trying to get ahead of it with wind and solar power, and there's only 10 miles of atmosphere there. How long, and look at all the, China wanted to build how many more coal plants?
Yep.
How long till you contaminate this 10 miles of atmosphere?
I think we already did. Okay, next turn. Jenny?
So I'm going to just go in a little bit different direction, given I'm so surprised that Jamin and Guy were together in a conversation. Solutions?
Yes.
So, you know, I'm challenged by, and I'm just way, way past the acceptance of this. My 18-year-old is so that happily hope-free, joyfully hope-free. Anyway, so you're talking about collective intelligence. I need to hear that it's not, that you're not looking at the human intelligence. Human intelligence is intelligence within a context and an ecosystem, right? We're essentially sacks of bacteria.
Yeah.
If bacteria is what can survive, we have to unsack ourselves and connect in other, like what, take us further beyond the you know, to go down your
well,
path.
I actually have a whole presentation that I'd intended to give, and I would still like to give, if people would like to hear it. I can do it fast or slow. Can I just get a showing of hands? How many people would actually like to see my presentation on solutions and on collective intelligence? Is there much interest in that?
How long?
Well, that's my next question. Can just throw out some numbers. How many minutes would y'all like to hear the presentation? No, I'm actually not kidding. I'll take an average. I mean, if it's
20. Too late. Make us
20. 10. I hear 20. I hear 10. About 20. 10. What was that? 40.5.
Can you do it in 8?
8 minutes. I got 8 minutes. 2 minutes. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. We got 10.
Can I insert a half a sentence back to the Sierra Club point?
Absolutely not. No, just go ahead, Susan. Yes. Yes.
It was actually right where it was supposed to be, along with any of the other dinners and topics and stuff. It wasn't headlines in the Mercury News, and it wasn't headlines in any other format. But I think that it does speak to, it was fuller here than it's ever been. I've ever seen it. And it was sold out early. So I think there's been a lot of interest, and I'm glad you came.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, and I'm glad everyone came.
I'm not able to stay. I just want to say something.
Yes, sir.
Before I leave.
Yes, sir.
I'm a scientist. I'm of the authors of the first report that proposed the 2-degree warming framework in 1989.
You were part of that team?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, which team?
I'm sorry, he's a scientist who was part of the team that in 1989 published the report sounding the alarms about 2 degrees. Thank you.
In 1989.
Yeah, that's just to set some context. And it's 30 some years later, almost 30 years later. And where are we? And I sat here and I couldn't help but feel in me the resonance of truth as Guy was speaking, that I know and I knew from what we understood then about the not so quantified feedback loops back then, that there was going to be disaster if they turned out to be strong, and they've been proved to be strong since then. So I find myself sitting here as a human that feels sad about this predicament and the predicament of his fellow people. And so the stirring in me is that well, maybe that's how we learn compassion. We never learned compassion in all our glorious civilizational success stories. It was always power, expansion, and treason of the heart. So maybe there's no other way to teach us. That's how I'm thinking these days.
I just wanted to echo a couple things for the room so they hear you. Number one, I heard you say that you heard truth, you felt truth in what Guy was presenting. Is that, yeah.
I worked on those models.
Yes, you worked on these models. You were a pioneer, an early pioneer, and we thank you for that. I just wanted to echo that to the room. He's hearing truth in what Guy is saying. And the other thing I wanted to echo is compassion, and perhaps this is what it's taking for us to learn compassion. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Jamie?
Yes, yeah, Michael. Sorry, you had your hand up for a while. Sorry about that.
So
Go ahead.
I can't stay, but I want to say something kind of significant. I have a degree in archaeology and anthropology, and I spent a lot of time studying a number of Native American cultures. The principal one, an important one for me, is the Iroquois. And if any of you are familiar with the Iroquois, their process of doing peacemaking when the tribes gathered.
You're welcome to come up here as well, if you, Michael. This is important.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah.
It was for them to sit in ceremony with each other for a number of days. And you know what they did? They exchanged beads. We call them wampum. But they exchanged these strings back and forth, and they repeated back to each other the names of the warriors on each side that they had killed. And they grieved together. These are the fierce Iroquois that we know about from all the wonderful aggrandizing that goes on when we romanticize the native world. They did other things, not all of it was good, and I'm talking about a very early seminal part of their culture that we do know about is real. The warriors got together with the women holding circle around them, and they grieved together. And they did it until the ceremony was over. And then they agreed to do the work of whatever the peacemaking agreement, treaty-making agreements between the different tribes was. For me, in my personal work, that I've come to realize is that we're not going to get anywhere with this with a top-down Newtonian mechanical fix-it solution. What Guy has already articulated, I think really brilliantly, is, yeah, there's science, but we're going to need a hell of a lot more than science to get through this. We're going to need some luck. We're going to need a lot of intention. We're going to need faith, which is, for me, the big one. And we're going to need what? What did I just talk about? The emotional level.
More trees.
Yeah, but we're not going to.
If every person on the planet planted a tree today.
Yeah, but
how many
that's still
trees would we
fixed.
have?
That's still a fix. What I'm trying to say is something different, okay? I'm not going to discount that, but I'm trying to make a point here.
Okay.
And the point has to do with this. Maybe the women in the room will relate to this before the men do, right? but it has to do with taking stock of what we have not grieved for. Where did we come from? The Native Americans are notoriously, and that's maybe the not right word, they are intimately aware of what they've lost. They keep trying to tell us, but we don't want to get it. They have lost what we can't even put words to. And here we are going to go, we're going to fix this thing now, we're going to figure this thing out. Well, I suggest that until we can come to an emotional bottom line and start to tell the truth about what we've lost, what we're going to grieve about, it may be very individual. I suggest that it's a lot more than that. There's a very large level here. I mean, there are animals that don't exist on the planet since my lifetime. Many. I don't even know their freaking names.
Every day.
Right? It's going on, what, every 12 a day or something, right? So the key element into this, to me, has to do with an emotional component, which if we don't come to a certain level of coming out of this massive denial that exists, like you said, we don't even want to talk about our dead grandmothers. I'm sorry, if we don't do the emotional level of work of this, how are we going to expect some alchemical outcome that's magically going to help the science go through? It's just not going to happen in my feeling tone, my level of reality. And this is a man who's done a lot of work with the feminine, done a lot of work with understanding matrilineal cultures and the teachings of native peoples. So if we're going to figure this out from some mechanical model, sorry, I don't see that getting done. And somebody here beautifully said it. You know, there are other systems involved. There is ecology. There's a larger universe of species, right? This is not about humans, so now we're going to figure out the problem of Earth. We're a part of this deal, and I'm going to suggest that if we can start to do a certain level of emotional truth-telling, that's the entry point. And if we don't do that, I don't know how we're going to, on top of it, go, well, look, I'm still really furious about this, that, and this, and the Democrats that, and the Republicans that, and what happened in World War II to my people, and the genocide, you know, hey, let's get it on the table. Do your own personal inventory, and let's start to do some work, and then come together in circles and talk about the emotional level so we can move past that together. And there are going to be people that are better at it than others, that I suggest that's an opportunity to let those people lead. Right? And then we come to the place of how can we begin to really move into this? And that's the alchemy, because I don't have those answers. I just know this first piece, I believe personally, deeply, heartfully, has got to be touched and worked with. And if we don't, I don't know how a Newtonian, mathematical, brilliant combination of many, many minds is going to actually outfigure this thing.
Great point, and we'll get to the other questions in a moment. I just wanted to give Peter an opportunity to respond to what you just said. Michael.
Well, there's two things. Absolutely, and this is what got me when I first heard this message, was the inner peace. What comes through me as a human when I dare to consider what's going on. And so there's many aspects of dealing with this information, and one is this deep feeling, this deep emotional, this deep daring to really look at ourselves in a real mirror of what we've done as a species, and not to blame ourselves, but just to say, wow. You know, the analogy I like to use is the apes that first found fire, right? Can you imagine? Oh my God, this is great. It's warm, it gives light, all this wonderful stuff. And then, hey, Tony, what are you doing? Let's go over here and play, right? And they turn around a few minutes later and the jungle's burned down, right? They didn't know what they had. And in a similar way, we didn't know what we had, and we're burning the jungle down. And who do I become amidst that, right? And then the quote by Einstein is where it feeds back to Jamin. We can't solve this from the mindset that got us here, right? And that's what he's saying too, right? And of course, it's very human for us to say, wait, we've got all this great power and technology, let's fix it. Very, very much human, and understand entirely. And that's part of Jamin's message too. It's like, hey, if we're going down, I'm going to go down trying to figure out everything I possibly can. And the Einstein quote is really the basis of what he's up to, that we're daring to share at theradish.org, is how can we change the mindset so that we might come at this from a different place, and it's not so much about the old way of activism necessarily, but a new way of looking at ourselves.
Yes, sir. And by the way, I invite anyone who wants to come up to the mic in the front of the room and be on camera if you'd like to. I mean, be part of history in the making. This is history in the making.
I haven't really thought this out. The idea just occurred to me during the talk here. But, you know, we're talking about a new way of thinking. And everybody says, oh yeah, if we had a new way of thinking, a new way of relating, and blah, 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 then that's what we need. I think that the problem is that the 60s failed. I think that we had an invention, LSD, and we had a really, the possibility of a new way of thinking and relating and really seeing the world in a different way. And as we know, that didn't last. And I can't see where a new way of thinking is going to come up now, because in those days we were rich. Everybody was rich. You didn't have to work. You could get food out of dumpsters and stuff, and we had plenty of extra energy to do whatever we wanted. Well, we went to Vietnam and so on, but nowadays we don't have that. We don't have food. We have farmers not being able to know when to plant, and you see the storms and all that. Very soon we're going to have serious food problems. We already got serious food problems, as they laugh at the few people who've pointed out that Syria had a drought and the people didn't have anything to eat. And you know, I just don't see where we're going to come up with a new way of thinking at this point, because there's no new element. People are getting poorer and poorer and nastier and nastier. And I think what we're seeing with Trump, for example, is absolutely consistent with the overarching direction we're going. And I don't see where we can fix it now, when we couldn't fix it back then when we had all those advantages.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes, Samantha. Yeah. And feel free to come to the front. Okay. Awesome. All right.
Hello. My name is Samantha Friend. I'm new. Hello. So I actually met Jamin here and Peter at the Climate March last Saturday in San Francisco, and I felt very magnetized to their booth and sat there for like 2 hours just listening to them talk about what Radish.org was, what the radical collective intelligence was, and I felt really astonished that I had been thinking about these things too. And as a millennial, I just want to say, to your point of where the opportunity is coming from for the consciousness to come about, I really think that with the tools available that we have now, the incredible inventions that are coming out, like the internet, technology, the amount of opportunity, the amount of incredibly well-educated people. Maybe they're not educated in the perfectly right way, but you know, we have all of this information available. We have all of these tools at our disposal. We have all of this opportunity to do great things. I really feel like we can collectively come together using the technology, using the information that we have to really bring the house down and like light a fire, start over if we can, if we have the amount of time. You know, I don't claim to know all of the sciences behind all of this, but I'm definitely open to it, and I think we are definitely listening, and a lot of people know that the whole ego crap, the whole consumerism crap isn't really getting us anywhere, and I'm personally really, really tired of it, and I know that I want more, and I know that other people want more, and so I feel really drawn to ideas like radical collective intelligence and a project that I'm working on called The Infinite Space to highlight people who are doing incredible things in sustainable ways, in ways of higher thinking, in ways of I don't know, sustainable technology, new opportunities that are really hitting these marks of profound intelligence and profound change making that we can do and that we can achieve, and that's already being achieved throughout time and history, and even as we lead up to today, so we can highlight and really focus on what is working and really talk about solutions and really come forward with. And give the opportunity to people who have this intelligence, who just don't know where to channel it, who just don't know where we can, you know, really put our chips, you know. So anyways, that's the word from the millennial.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have hope.
Thank you. Yes, Susan.
I remember though in the 60s that David Brower had been saying, I'll paraphrase, to just have a really good time working together, because if you don't, you're just going to get depressed, facing reality, right? Conservation. And Paul Ehrlich with the population bomb back in the 60s, you know, all this is coming forward. But what I'm concerned about, I don't know if Peter's still here, the word emotional. So when I hear that, I think of Fox News. I think of those that are really connecting with the grieving of what we had when we could drink the water in the Sierras without Giardia. And when we grieve, it's a low energy state, and people can get pretty disempowered when they're sad. But when they're impassioned, they can either get mean or they can get very active. And so I'm trying to put together tonight how, you know, we get more energy when we're hopeful, I think. If there's one piece to get hopeful about. For instance, the millennials, and I've got 3 of them, and one of them thinks they're going to solve it all because they're so smart and they have all these connections already, right? Because they already think kind of collectively and they do so much online. So I'm trying to put that together with, if we accept the truth, if we can see it with a naked eye, and that there's an urgency without getting disempowered with sadness, hopelessness, and the visions of decay or blow up. And stay connected together, not in the sense of loss, but in the sense of belonging and moving forward. And I'm eager to hear how Radish can help us do that.
Great, thank you, Susan. And sir, and then we'll get to you. Go ahead. Yeah, feel free to come on up. I encourage everyone to.
No. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. I've been following Guy's work for about 3 years or so, and been through the 6 or 7 stages of grieving, and bounced around through those at different times. But I did go to Jamin's website when I read about this, and it seemed like there's a real contrast here. And I'm what you're describing, I haven't gone very deeply into it, but it sounds like more of our being enamored with our own cleverness again, and I don't see how it's going to create the miracle that you propose. And I would like to hear Guy's response to what you put out, because I know you guys are going to do something tomorrow together. Is that right? Out on the bay?
That was the original plan, but
okay.
kind of other things have jumped in that have, like Earth Day and the Climate March. So
Okay.
we may or may not go out on the water tomorrow. Let's put it that way.
All right. Well, I would be interested to hear your response, Guy, to what Jamin very briefly described. I know it was a very quick summary, but do you have any thoughts you want to share with us?
Or you could wait till after I give the 10-minute presentation.
Okay, would that be better?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
And somebody had a question for Jamin that I think came in.
This gentleman had a question over here as well.
You know, because we're all talking about our solutions to the problem. I'm still more interested in like trying to get the science down in my head. I talked to you earlier about never doing the math. I wanted to be a biologist when I was a kid, and I never wanted to do all the math. And I read a lot of Sam Karana's stuff, and other people's stuff, a lot of the stuff that you've posted and stuff like that. Very interested in the methane thing. Me and a buddy of mine that I've been talking to for years, we've been talking about the methane thing for quite a few years. I mean, there was guys that were lighting methane bubbles on fire in Canada 4 or 5 years ago on YouTube. but, you know, like the methane bubbles now in the Siberia have gotten up to, I think they've counted like 3,000. There were like 700 of them a year or two ago. It's just like zits across the Siberian landscape, let alone whatever might burp out of the Arctic Ocean. And I'm just, you know, like I'm just wondering what you think. I mean, do you think these bubbles are going to just keep getting worse and worse and worse? You know, I've almost just thinking California where they want to take care of methane problems with dumps and stuff like that. Why don't we go up and just, where's the scientists tapping all the methane out of the big bubbles out there?
Yes. Yes, everything's going to get worse.
Yeah.
Because it's going to get worse, and then it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
You know how everything has to get worse before it gets better? Not this time.
I was already crapping my pants earlier when the man said that 99% of the population could disappear and we would be okay because science would figure it all out. And I was flipping my brain out because, like, how many nuclear power plants are on the planet? I mean, seriously, nobody's thought through any of this stuff.
There's about 750 parts per billion methane in the atmosphere at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. About 1750, there's now approximately 2,000 parts per billion of methane in the atmosphere. Methane is more than 100 times more powerful a greenhouse gas, molecule for molecule, than carbon dioxide. So we're already at the CO2 equivalent of more than 600 parts per million equivalent carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And 350 was the absolute upper limit. We haven't had humans on the planet until the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. 280 parts per million. 280 parts per million was the upper limit. This is probably safe. And James Hansen actually said 300 to 350, with 350 being the absolute upper limit that could support humans on the planet. And now we're at the CO2 equivalent of 600 and change. And I'm only counting 2 of the handful of greenhouse gases out there.
Yes.
But I
So
thought they're saying it's 402 parts that we're at
we're
now.
412 parts carbon dioxide in the
Carbon
atmosphere.
dioxide, yeah.
Just not
That's
saying
just
it's
carbon
methane.
dioxide.
Okay.
Carbon dioxide equivalent, you have to add on methane, nitrous oxide, chlorofluorocarbons,
Yeah.
water vapor,
It's all of the other additions.
and so on. And just looking at only 2 of those, methane and carbon dioxide, we're at more than 600 parts per million equivalent. So, of course, the closer we look, the more evidence we're going to find that the situation is dire.
Yeah.
Of course.
We're gonna have
And
the
so-
4th hottest summer in a row.
We're going to have the 4th hottest year
In a row, sorry, year.
2014 set a record as
Yeah.
the hottest year in planetary history.
Yeah.
And then 2015 broke that record,
Yes.
2016 broke that record, and 2017 will
Yeah.
almost certainly break that record unless
Yeah.
something really weird happens.
No, we're already breaking the record. We've already
So,
broken all the records.
we're-
Yeah.
I don't know what we're looking for here.
I know. No,
Yet
that's-
another sign, yet another piece of evidence that it's all gonna be all right. It's not. The methane and carbon dioxide alone ensure our imminent demise. And yeah, okay, so let's not put the 9-year time bomb on it. Let's say it's 19 instead. Does that make it a whole lot better? Does that make you feel good? Not me.
Oh, thank you.
And we're past the point of no return, and any reasonable climate scientist who actually studies the evidence will admit that. I've been involved on email chains with Michael Mann, and he knows everything that you know. He knows everything that I know. He reads my work, and he will never admit to it, ever, because he's a Regents professor. He's a distinguished professor at Pennsylvania State University. He's not going to lose that position, or lose support for that position, and lose his money by admitting that he knows what I know and that he actually believes it.
Wasn't he the one that was just in front of Congress last week and then said he got railed against by everybody else?
He's in front of Congress all the time.
Yeah.
He's the go-to
Yeah,
guy. He's the climate change guy in
Yeah.
this country. And that's why he's not going to admit that he knows what I know. Because then he wouldn't be in front of Congress. He wouldn't be in front of the television. He wouldn't be telling you that the last thing we need to do is to stop burning coal.
Yeah.
He admits that he knows what I know. He loses all support. And probably all credibility. Because the mainstream media would go on the attack. If I were better known, I'd be the most hated person in the country. The only thing I have going for me is that nobody knows me except for you 30 people. And you seem nice enough.
Thanks, Guy. All right, I'm going to go ahead and give my, let's just call it 10 minutes, okay, presentation. So I'm going to start with a little bit of background, and then I'm going to gradually get into collective intelligence, just so you kind of see how we morphed into it. When I say we, I'm including my brother Eric Miller. I'm including all of y'all. Peter is a big part of it, and other people are joining. Amanda and I are in a deep conversation. And so Samantha, I mean everyone. So you're all welcome. In fact, you're all very much needed in collective intelligence. So how did this all start? I was working very intensively on the problem of how to end world hunger in 2011, 2012, and doing a lot of interesting modeling and ideation and talking with a lot of smart folks. And one thing that we couldn't really get away from is we needed about $50 billion per year to end hunger in the short term while we figured out longer term solutions. That's a lot of money every year. And then along came the legalization of cannabis in the state of Washington. And it just so happens that my great-grandfather, Diego Pellicer, was the largest grower of hemp in the world in the Victorian era. And so I put two and two together. I'm also a marketing expert. I was corporate strategy manager at Microsoft. And so I put two and two together and saw a huge multi-$10 billion industry in the making without an established brand. And so I launched, to everyone's surprise, even my own, if this thing doesn't work. No, I launched Diego Pellicer, a brand of premium cannabis, which quickly became international news amongst the cannabis community, and causing it was actually some folks in Taiwan who called me the Bill Gates of bud. And so I set about building a multi-billion-dollar brand of cannabis, of all things, committing from the very get-go to donating 100% of my share of the profits to ending world hunger. And so in my first interview, that went viral. Everyone's talking about the Bill Gates of bud. The Taiwanese created this evil anime character based on me that goes around trying to sell weed to teenagers. And here I am in Fox News in New York. All right. Sounding very much like a Republican, talking all about the money and the profit. I did my share of brown nosing. Then I was interviewed on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange announcing the dot-bong era of legalized cannabis. And then I contacted my old friend, former Mexican President Vicente Fox, and everything exploded. Everyone just had to have a piece of us and find out what the heck we were cooking up. Even Wolf Blitzer. So we dug in deep, and we did 4 major events in the summer of 2013, culminating in a major 3-day symposium in Mexico. Here we are at our first press conference in Seattle, end of May, with kind of a who's who of the cannabis and hemp industry. And here we are on the front page of the Seattle Times the next morning. Here we are in Mexico at this 3-day symposium right in the heart of the drug war, and this was the #1 story in Mexico and much of Latin America for 2 days straight. And we had representatives from Uruguay there, and a few months later, little Uruguay became the first country in the world to legalize cannabis. So suddenly, from going from ending world hunger and seeing a big branding and brand building opportunity to generate billions of dollars to contribute and start the process of ending world hunger, we're now ending prohibition, and that was totally transformational. And so I started to figure out that, wait a second, if we go at these problems holistically, as opposed to one at a time, we can actually do some pretty powerful stuff. So the next big thing that this morphed into was creating a new standard for the global economy. We talked about how capitalism is one of the culprits to all this. And we heard about compassion as being one of the big keys. So we set about creating a new standard for the entire global economy. My brother Eric is key in this, called CCC, Certified Compassionate Companies. Right? Think certified organic, but applied to every facet of the entire global economy. All profits go to eradicating hunger. The company must be socially transformational in everything it does, and ecologically regenerative. By the way, this was all before I even heard about Professor Guy McPherson, which totally rocked my world. So you'll get the best is yet to come. So one pioneering, brave company, Sato Hemp of Japan, led by our brother Takuya Sato, who the Sato family has the longest legacy of hemp in the world, even longer than mine. And so in fact, this man, Takuya Sato, is the leader of the hemp industry in Japan. In fact, he is the hemperor of Japan. So the hemperor and company and family stood up and said, we will be the first certified compassionate company. And so we've been building towards that with tremendous leadership from Eric, I might add. And here's the strategy. Certified compassionate companies give all their profits to ending hunger. This creates a global movement. Who would not want to buy a pair of badass Sato hemp jeans knowing that the profits go to feed hungry people? So it really starts a revolution in the consumer culture. And it creates a virtuous cycle. So where do the profits go exactly? So Eric and I put our heads together. We looked at, what are the different ways that we can contribute to ending hunger? And we didn't find a model that we loved. So with Eric's awesome leadership, we created one, the Community Cafe. And with outstanding leadership from Crystal and Rodriguez, another awesome millennial on our team, she really grabbed the baton. And between her and Eric and Jake Gehring and a bunch of folks, we made it happen and fed an entire town, an entire community at their annual Parade of Lights in December of 2015. And so all these wheels are turning, and we're working with all kinds of communities: Mexico, Latin America, Japan, Spain. Eric and Crystal went off to Spain and have been blazing a trail there. We've made inroads to Haiti. And we started to see that really a new level of thinking was emerging. And over time, we gave it the name Radical Collective Intelligence, because it's a collective intelligence of a very diverse global community coming together across all ages and different backgrounds and languages and cultures. And my goodness, have we had a time, learning really to communicate with Japan. But what we started to see is, as we put our heads together in this new level of thinking, it's like if you put a bunch of batteries together, the light bulb gets brighter, right? If you put them together in series, such that they're working in the same direction. So we've been pioneering this with our colleagues in Japan, putting our heads together in new ways. And it's not just the combined voltage of all those batteries. Another friend of mine, Nathan Mervold, he is world famous, former chief technology officer at Microsoft. He says perspective is worth 30 IQ points. Now he's talking about the perspective within one cranium. Go out there and get more perspective. Well, shoot, if we just put our heads together, we get that perspective way faster than reading books, right? Or watching videos. So out of this, we've been developing various different components of our platform for radical collective intelligence. And I'm just going to mention a few of them now, because it really is deep. But I invite you all who are interested, come take my card, call me up, we can talk about it, because it's fascinating, and I love to talk about it. And the fact that you're interested really makes me want to talk with you about it. So please don't be shy, and let's talk about it. So one of these is not just video conferences, recorded video conferences. Conversations worth having are conversations worth sharing. How many times you've had a great conversation and said, oh my goodness, I wish you'd been there? Yes, sir.
Thank you for letting me interrupt. Why did this not work in the hippie era?
We didn't have the technology. We didn't have video conferencing in the hippie era. So it was lack of communications technologies, not lack of will, not lack of creativity, not lack of desire, not lack of fun of coming together. But we didn't have the technology.
You know, I want to repeat my thesis. The 60s really brought a new way of thinking, offered a new way of thinking. I mean, the music, for example, was unthought of before the drugs, okay? But all of this stuff was discussed in the 60s, and it failed. So I think we have to answer why didn't it work then, because none of this is new, all this.
Have you heard of the Digital Be-In project and event?
Just before the meeting I did. Now, I went to a lot of be-ins.
Yeah.
And I don't think the technology is going to, I don't think, you know, if you want, Einstein says we need a new way of thinking. He doesn't say we need a better technology.
This isn't just about technology. Technology is one enabling component, but I would invite you to a public conversation with me and anyone else who would like to join to actually explore what happened. Why did the 60s fail? Let's get to the root of that.
The music went on, and the music was scalable because of the technology of music at that point. But human action wasn't scalable because we didn't have this technology, but that music hit.
Oh, wait a minute, all right, so we had some, you know,
we had vinyl, and then we had cassettes, and then we had digital. So this is action in that form.
But it didn't change, the changes in music weren't the result of that. The changes, well, anyway, that's my...
Let's have the conversation. That's a separate track. Let's do it, and let's get to the root of it. Let's call it What's Up with the 60s, right? Let's figure it out.
Consciousness raising, you know,
yeah.
because I tell my son who's 29, he thinks he knows everything, and I said, he mocks me because I was a hippie, I still am a hippie, I guess, and I'm proud of it, and I tell him, you know what, we had really good values, and what's better than that?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's I invite the two of you and anyone else who wants to join, let's have a conversation about the 60s. And let's record it and take it to the world through recorded video conferences. So this is one component of it. It's a way to share the conversation with the world and invite other people to participate in the conversation, even after the fact, through, for example, comments on a YouTube video, which we can then respond to. So I'm just giving people a taste of some of the stuff that's in this massive box of chocolates called radical collective intelligence. This is one. Another is different kinds of reality through goggles and whatnot, virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality. Again, this isn't some be-all, end-all, oh man, all we need is more technology, but it does bring us closer together. Video conferencing brings us this close. With mixed reality, we're practically kissing. And it's really amazing. And this is very powerful for collaboration and co-creation and understanding and empathy and sharing like we're doing here. Another is a very fancy taxonomy, and it's actually not that hard, but it begins with something called a telos, which means roughly aim in Greek. I know we've got a couple experts from on Greece here. But the telos begins with a question. With an aim. The aim is a whole world. We want a world that is whole, a world that's healthy, that's complete, a whole world. What does our world need in order to be whole? It starts with that question. Well, we need for people to be whole and we need for the planet to be whole. It is one way of breaking it down. Why even separate them in the first place is a great question. But let's just go with it for a moment. What does it take for people to be whole? Well, we have physical needs and then we have, kind of higher needs. And what does it mean for the planet to be whole? Well, the air needs to be whole. We need an atmosphere that has integrity. We need water to be clean and whole and support a thriving ocean, aquatic life. We need the land to be whole, not desertifying or full of chemicals. We need ecosystems and species to be whole, not going extinct, et cetera, right? And we continue to break it down. Now, here's one kind of simplified way of breaking down some of the threads. And this is just for example. I certainly don't recommend this taxonomy, but if you root down and root down, come on, specifically, think of it as a dashboard, keeping score, making sure you address persons with, do they destroy what whole focuses not on the needs of the planet, but on the problems, and which problems are impacting and driving other problems, and you'll see overpopulation is right in the middle. I mean, there's just too many of us. We're too heavy a footprint. So, finally, on to solutions. I'm going to give some examples that collective intelligence, different forms of collective intelligence have created to date. But wait for the crescendo at the end of the exponential rise in radical collective intelligence that we're predicting and actually orchestrating. So these are solutions created by lesser minds than the one that we're about to behold. For example, and many of these are under development, but solutions can range from carbon sequestration systems, massive carbon sequestration systems, methods of regenerative agriculture based on the principles of holistic land management as pioneered by Alan Savory, a close friend who I've also interviewed for a couple of hours on Radish. Reversing desertification, sequestering carbon at a planetary scale, using nature to sequester carbon. More efficient modes of transportation. Do we all need SUVs? Controversial forms of energy production. I'm certainly not recommending nuclear, but I'm saying one person's, this is a great example, one person's sin is another person's problem, or the planet's problem, better said. And the next point I want to make is about how complex solutions are roll-ups of simpler things. This is a crucial point. Again, another solution to our need to get around or perhaps impress each other is the car. And here I show kind of just an artistic conceptual, what's called the bomb explosion, bill of materials. So in manufacturing, you break down a final product into its subassemblies or major systems, which in turn are broken down into their various parts. A key concept of collective intelligence is that we swarm around, we bring the appropriate teams together. Again, this is just an example. I'm not a proponent of cars of any kind, but it's something that we're all so familiar with that I can point to it. Everyone says, oh yeah, I know that a car consists of all these things and it has 13,000 parts. You can't necessarily name them, but you get the idea. Now, imagine that we're creating some solution. Again, I'm just using this as a model, as an example. We get specialized teams to swarm around each and every part, subassembly, major system, and the final integration with a view to creating the best possible solution that we can, whether it is carbon sequestration, generation of energy, transportation, regenerative agriculture, you name the solution. We swarm around each and every part at each and every level. We root down to the details, we go all the way up to integration, but we bring together teams using the other technologies that I mentioned. Recorded video conferences, mixed reality, each and every part, subassembly, major system, and the final integration with a view to creating the best possible solution that we can, whether it is carbon sequestration, generation of energy, transportation, regenerative agriculture, you name the solution. We swarm around each and every part at each and every level. We root down to the details, we go all the way up to integration, but we bring together teams using the other technologies that I mentioned. Recorded video conferences, mixed reality, the sun, okay? And rather than go and try to blow up the sun, as in the final scene of Star Wars, even if we reduce the amount of solar radiation hitting the Earth by 1%, that would have a major impact. I don't know what the exact amount is, but again, existing manifestations of collective intelligence have come up with some ideas. We need radical collective intelligence at a planetary scale to figure this out, both from an engineering standpoint, a science standpoint, a control standpoint, and cool the planet, so that all this methane that's just starting to burp out, we can keep it locked in place with colder temperatures. To a degree, to what degree we need to model, we need more science, we need more data, and we need fundamentally more collective intelligence. We need to get smarter about how we figure stuff out and how we change things. So, remember I talked to you about, and I promised exponentially growing collective intelligence. On what do I base that? Here's the idea. Imagine that the technological platform, but not just the technological, the cultural, right? the methods, the procedures, the ways that we go about this. All of this is represented by this blue slab, which is the platform for radical collective intelligence. That platform, in turn, supports a certain degree of collective intelligence as a function of the people who are involved and how they work together and how they store information and process information and create new information and create new solutions. That's all represented by this big brown brain that's sitting on top of the slab. Now, what's this brain going to do? One of its top priorities is to design, architect, and engineer the next generation of the platform for radical collective intelligence, so that that platform can support an even bigger collective intelligence, an even smarter collective intelligence, an even deeper, broader, more integrated, more holistic. Well, what are we going to do with that giant collective intelligence? Well, one of its top priorities will be building even the next generation of the platform for radical collective intelligence. Do you see a pattern emerging here? That's the idea. So, what all of this is shaping up for is a cosmic game of chicken. Here you've got abrupt climate change, piloted by the evil Dr. McPherson. Just kidding, it's not his fault. But, you know, articulated by my friend Guy. On the other side, in the Nevada desert, coming in at 125 miles an hour and accelerating, is collective intelligence. Who is going to win at this game of chicken? Right now, the odds favor this car, the abrupt climate change car, as pointed out by Professor Guy McPherson. At the moment, the odds don't look too good for us, or the rest of complex life, or the rest of life, period, or the planet as a whole. That's why I'm doing everything I can, my way of living a life of excellence, and I don't guarantee success, but I do guarantee to step on this accelerator as hard as I can to at least scare the shit out of this car and hopefully get it to swerve off the road so that we prevail. That's it. That's radical collective intelligence in a nutshell. Thank you. And may the odds be ever in your favor. And you can actually increase the odds by joining the Radical Collective Intelligence. So please join us. Come to radish.org, sign up, talk with me, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, I'm going to turn it over to Professor Guy McPherson so that he can have the last word and answer your question. Hey, you know, Guy, what do you think about this whole collective intelligence and the search for solutions?
The black car, really? Like the black hat?
Well, it's like,
no, it's like the Western movie doesn't do that.
Nobody wanted that.
I don't like to use the word hope, but I hope you're right. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Yes, yes. And by the way, folks are welcome to come on up and be part of History in the Making. We're recording the whole thing up here. So Doug, come on up. All right. You're going to be on the hot seat anyway in a month with your presentation, so this is a trial run.
I challenged Professor McPherson before. Now I want to turn that coin and praise him a lot. One of my heroes was David Brower, who was known as the guy who was so far as an outlier that he made the people that were kind of only slightly insane sound sane. So I want to thank you very much, because without you being out there, people wouldn't think about possibilities like radical collective intelligence, those really thin margin possibilities of success. Or maybe they wouldn't live their lives better as a result of, you know, potentially imminent fate coming to get them. So I challenged you before. I just want to say thank you very much for being here, and I really appreciate what you do. Then my question for you, Jamin, is the bigger brains and the bigger platforms. How does that relate to the AI singularity that Elon Musk is talking about? That's going to kill us all.
No. Well, it's not going to kill us all. Here's the thing. So up until people started taking collective intelligence seriously, up until then, people were laser focused on the bright light, and like, you know, moths going to the bright light and getting zapped, we were just, oh, artificial intelligence, because that was taking off exponentially. In fact, I worked with one of the early pioneers of artificial intelligence, Dr. Lawrence Fogel, the inventor of evolutionary programming, a whole field, a whole technology of artificial intelligence, and he was my mentor, and I learned so much from him. The thing is, if we don't come together, artificial intelligence, while there's still computers, while there's still electric power to power them, right, AI will outstrip us, right? It'll outgun us. But what I'm proposing with collective intelligence, we will stay so far ahead of AI. And in fact, we will radically transform AI, but the collective intelligence will be in the driver's seat. Because not only will it be the ones that created AI, it will be constantly improving that AI. And leveraging that AI in forms such as you see with the recorded video conferences and the teleological taxonomies and all the methods and systems and tools and platforms that come together to equate to this radical collective intelligence. It's not governed by humans anymore. It's governed by the collective intelligence of humans using technology. And the borders will be blurred, but really it's human intelligence that is the foundation of collective intelligence, including its creations called artificial intelligence. That's my perspective, and I could be wrong. Yes, sir?
Will the video be on YouTube?
Yes, it'll be on YouTube. And you'll be able to find it most easily by going to radish.org.
I mean Dr. McPherson.
Beg your pardon?
Okay.
Oh yeah, the whole thing. Yeah. Yes.
Do you think there's a difference between the collective consciousness and the collective intelligence?
I don't see a difference.
Okay.
And no, I don't.
Okay.
But again, I'm not like the world's authority on conscious. Like, I'm just learning about all this whole consciousness hacking thing and all this stuff that I don't know anything about that kind of messes with my head. But bring it. You know, let's use all the tools. We're a tool-using species. And our tool-using nature, one could argue, I would agree, has gotten us into this mess. I really think it was the agricultural revolution and the whole partitioning of land, and this is mine and not yours, versus we're all members of a whole. I think that's what got us into this mess. But now that we are so far down the path, we've gotten to a point where the tools are so powerful that they may be necessary to co-create the miracles that we need to save ourselves.
What is the
yeah?
I just blurted things out, sorry.
That's okay.
What's the Elon Musk? I know he plans for the rich to go to Mars, and the rest of us can just hang around here.
Sure.
But in our bunkers or whatever.
Yeah.
So what is his? I know he's worried about AI.
Well, apparently he and many other folks prophesize that AI will so far and fast outstrip human intelligence that we'll be kind of left in the dust intellectually by these machines that can outthink us. And that's what was articulated earlier. But I actually don't know the details of that. I can't wait to talk with Elon about it.
They ain't got 10 years.
Pardon me?
They won't be able to do that in 10 years.
No. It'd take more like 15 to 18 for AI to surpass human intelligence in the most optimistic scenario. But that's if we have electricity.
Then they can have the dust planet.
No. Well, my chips are going here. It's collective intelligence. We'll
nuclear ball of flame. We'll be done with it by then, right?
Well, they can power on the methane bubble.
There you go. They'll power on the methane.
That's right.
So what is singularity?
Yeah. So singularity is a concept that was coined by Dr. Ray Kurzweil, who also published the book The Singularity is Near back in 2005. And I remember going to a talk and talking with him about it afterwards and getting his perspectives. All of that was based on projections for the ascent of artificial intelligence. There was no talk about collective intelligence anywhere in the book, to my surprise. And what's interesting there is I actually think that's an artifact of this same dynamic that was set in motion by the agricultural revolution. Hey, this is mine, you get away, right? We used to share a lot more, right, before the agricultural revolution, 12,000 years ago or whatever. Collective intelligence gets us back to that sharing.
How?
Yeah. How? By bringing us together.
How? How does that actually bring us together?
Well, it brings us together, for example, groups of us who are passionate about one specific thing that we need to work on right now can actually come together from all around the world through video conferences. And then by recording those video conferences and sharing those with the world, other people who found out about it only later, for example, can come and actually read transcripts of what was said. You search using Google and zero in, and oh my goodness, I didn't know that there was this micro tribe over here that's talking about this. I thought I was the only person in Bangladesh who was interested in that, and I may still be, but now there's a tribe that I can connect to and be a part of and talk about this aspect that I'm so passionate about.